Welcome everyone to our webinar today, and we have a very special guest today, Maurizio Zanella. Ciao, Maurizio.
Ciao, Tom. Ciao, everyone.
Maurizio is the proprietor of one of the most famous estates, not just in Franciacorta, but in Italy, called Ca del Bosco. And Franciacorta, as I'm sure all of you know, has been around since the mid to late 1960s, and Maurizio has been one of the driving forces in this wine. The winery opened up in the late 60s, and he is really probably as much of an ambassador as anyone, as much of a goodwill ambassador for these wines as anyone. So we're going to talk about the current releases as well as a lot of history today. And to get you in the mood here, to show you exactly where we're talking about, I'm going to put up a picture here, Maurizio, and you can tell us about this beautiful land, this beautiful area of Franciacorta.
Yeah.
So tell us about this picture. What are we looking at? Where is your estate from here?
Beautiful, beautiful picture. So we are just north of a village called Clusane on Iseo Lake. You see the Iseo Lake, and behind the fog on the north, you can see some mountain with some snow, because there is a glacier called Adamello. And this mountain, this glacier, is probably the most important thing from Franciacorta. That is the name of our region. This picture is taken by a vineyard that we own, that is at 500-meter altitude,
right.
500 feet. That means 1,500 feet. I am correct.
Yes.
Of altitude, and is one of the highest of Franciacorta, where you can see all the Iseo Lake and the Valcamonica Valley. That is where we camp, the cold climate, in order to get the correct ripeness of the fruit, having the acidity and the pH that you need to make ferment your wine twice. The first time to get from sugar to wine, like in all the world, and the second time to get your bubble, make a second fermentation inside the bottle, because this is Franciacorta. Franciacorta is the name of the region. When we say the human, La Franciacorta. When we say the boy, Il Franciacorta is the name of the wine.
Interesting, okay.
And sorry, Tom, if I tell you this, like, you know, we love to call it wine and not sparkling, because in Europe, you have only two regions where it's forbidden to call it sparkling or mousseux. One, obviously, is in north of France, and is a very famous region called Champagne, where they produce a wine called Champagne. And the other one is Franciacorta, where we don't produce sparkling wine, but we produce a wine called Franciacorta. Those wines, incidentally, have the bubble, but they are not known about their bubble. They know about their wine, their history, their culture, their tradition, that in our region is not so long, because we are only 60 years old. Was one of the first DOC produced in Italy in the 60s. To Franciacorta, dedicated to a wine that has some bubble inside. So
it was 1967, correct? That you were
exactly.
Okay.
DOC, you know everything, Tom, better than me. I don't remember that.
I don't know about that, but okay.
But you are right, because the first DOC in Italy was Barolo, and it was in the beginning of 67, and the number 5 DOC was Franciacorta, and was in November 67.
And at that point in 1967, how many producers were there, and were they producing, you said not to call it sparkling wine, but were they producing sparkling wine, or was it just table wine?
No, they was producing already. The first, at the time, was a sparkling wine. At the time, Hyland was a spumante. at that time, and there was 12 producer. The first one that was beginning in 61 name was Berlucchi. It was the first one starting the production of Franciacorta in those times. And Ca del Bosco obviously was starting the 70, exactly 3 years after the DOC came. So we was one of the first winery to take the Franciacorta and try to make Franciacorta known in the world. What the characteristic from the friends that are listen to us today is the Franciacorta is a very small region, is only 3,000 hectares, that means 7,500 acres. That is really a tiny area. Let's say is twice Barolo, is close to Barbaresco, okay, like a dimension, and so it's not a big area. Franciacorta today is producing less than 20 million bottles a year. That is really not a big number.
Well, there's probably some champagne houses that themselves produce $20 million a year, right?
We are 20 million bottles with 120 producers. So it's a little Burgundy, if you want, because there are not industry, there are not big cooperative, seller, but are all farmers. We are all farmers. For sure, there are some that are bigger, some that are smaller, but no one is negociant. All the producers of Franciacorta are recoltant. This is unique in Italy.
Okay.
And that's why probably we was able to put together some rules. You know that in Europe, you have the rules from the DOCG, where Franciacorta is becoming the year. And that's why we are right to have the most severe, the most strict rules in production of those kind of wine in the world. There is no other area that have such strong rules in producing wine. Obviously, you don't get a good wine because you have rules, but rules help the community to go in a good direction and help the community, the producer, to achieve a certain result. And so those rules, in my opinion, they're being very, very important to create and give to Franciacorta such a fast reputation in only 60 years. And why? Because other areas producing sparkling wine in Italy, they was not so successful, probably because they don't have those kind of rules and those kind of philosophy dedicated to the quality of the wine. And so we have the lowest production per hectare in the world. We have the longest time of maturation of the wine on the east in the world. That there are two simple things, but that give an idea of direction of quality that the Franciacorta producers they want to achieve.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because when you talk about rules, a joke that's popular, I think everywhere in the world, is that the rules are made by lawyers, and that we can joke all we want about lawyers. I hope there's no lawyers watching, but seriously, it's like, but these rules, as you said, the stricter they are, that can equate to quality.
Yeah, I believe is a kind of educational, is a good way to impose to the producer a direction and give to the producer a faster way to get a good tradition, a good culture about the winemaking that we cannot buy. You cannot buy the tradition, you cannot buy the culture, you have to get it. But for sure, rules is something that help you, and fast is an accelerator to get this tradition and this culture.
Right. Now let's, just before we go into the specifics of your wines, tell us again, now we saw a nice picture of the area. You are about 1 hour from Milan, is that correct?
Yes, I give you to your listener some notice about Franciacorta that probably they never heard this name if they are not wine maniac. Franciacorta is a small region, is located in the area of the lake. So most of the people coming from United States, they come to Como Lake,
right?
perhaps thanks to George Clooney, I don't know why, or to Garda Lake. So we are in between Como and Garda Lake, just south of a beautiful lake called Iseo.
See.
And just south of this lake that we show in the picture that you showed to us, there is Franciacorta. So is more precisely, we are located between Milano and Venice, and more precisely, we are located between Bergamo and Brescia. Okay. So it is a beautiful area in the north, very close to the Alps that we can see in the picture on the background. We can see the Alps mountain that is, like I was telling in the beginning, what gives to our region and our grapes the freshness in order to get to fermentation with no many problem in keeping the freshness of the wine that they need to be more fresh, more mineral in order to get a good result after two fermentation, one in the tank and one inside the bottle. So the name Franciacorta is very curious, have nothing to do with France, because perhaps in the translation of Franciacorta, someone can think to France, and now became from Latin, because in Latin, the name was Curte Francae. Curte is a small region, Curte, and Francae is duty-free, because was an area with no taxation, because it was very poor. So the king decided that this small region have not to pay tax. Unfortunately, this was many years ago, but for 300 years, from the 1200 to the 1500, so 300 years, the people here was not paying tax. Unfortunately, not anymore. Now we pay the tax, but at the time, they was not paid tax for 300 years. This became the name of the region.
Interesting. Okay.
Curte Franca, so a region with no taxes. Okay. This is the meaning of the name Franciacorta. And Franciacorta can be done today with the 4 varietal, 3 that are international, let me say, Chardonnay, Pinot Blanc, and Pinot Noir. And there is a 4th varietal that is just being introduced in the DOCG rules exactly in harvest 2019, so just 2 years ago, and it's called Herba Mate. That is a very local varietal, white varietal, that was on the east side of Garda Lake, coming to Brescia, go up to the valley to Franciacorta, and we are the only appellation to have put this old local varietal back in the rules, and until a maximum of 10%. Now this grapes is very irrelevant. We have only totally 6 hectares, so on 3,000 is nothing, but it's a project that will take 300 hectares, I believe, in 5-6 years. Okay. And 10%, and will be changing a little bit the taste of the wine, because this varietal is local and gives the authenticity to the wine with our terroir. But more than this, is something that have a ripeness at least 2 weeks after the Chardonnay, and give us the time to finish the harvest, and give us the time to pick up grapes that have a very, very, very high acidity. And so this varietal will be, in my opinion, very helpful in the future with the global warming. So I believe Herba Mate will play a very important role in the future.
Yeah, we talked about that when we had lunch in Chicago together. This was a few years ago. And it was just, so there's only just, and great for people, I'll type it in. People watching is Herba Mate, ERBAMAT. And you said it's very late ripening, so that this was not a solution to climate change, but something that could could help you, in particular.
Yeah.
So you said you have a few hectares, but have you incorporated any into your wines yet or not?
Well, it's so irrelevant. Yeah, the answer is yes, but is very, very little. In the percentage we cannot even mention, because we are talking about less 1%. So
Okay.
it is not correct. I tell you this news because it's very interesting to know that Franciacorta in the future will have this varietal and will be very important, but not today. It's something that we have to talk in the future.
Okay. Well, let's move from the future to the past a little bit, and let's talk about a little bit of your history and the history of the winery. Now, where are you from? Where were you born?
I born in Bozen. I born in Südtirol, so I am more German than Italian.
Okay. Which city in Südtirol? I'm sorry again.
Bolzano.
Bolzano, see, of course.
Bolzano.
Yeah, very
born Bolzano. Okay. And so I am more, like I say, Südtiroler than Italian. Okay. But then I moved with my family to Milano when I was 5 years old, and my family was in a completely different, let's say, activity, not in the wine. Then let's say that my family, they want to have natural food and natural product, and so my mother and my father, they decide to buy a small farm just east of Milano. And so they bought this small farm that was in the middle of a forest. And on the city map, on the plan, this small house in the middle of the forest was called Ca, that means is the short for casa, house, in the Del Bosco, Ca del Bosco, because it was a small house in the middle of the forest. So this is where the name of the winery came from, this small farm that my family bought in 1968. And just to have, chicken, pig, and some fruit tree, a very small, 4-acre, very, very small property, where they living in Milano, that was a big city, they want to have a small farm in order to get, resource, to get food, to get some, let's say, sources to have a better life in terms of food, of eating.
They could be self-dependent, right?
Yeah. Then what's happened in the 70s? In the 70s, there was kind of...
Here's a picture of your mother, Anna Maria Clementi.
Thank you so much. This is my mommy, yes.
And I understand that she planted the first vines in the estate.
Yes, she planted the first wine in 68. And now we have the most iconic wine from Ca del Bosco, and I believe also from Franciacorta. The critic give us this recognition, where Anna Maria Clementi is the most important Franciacorta produce from in all the region, and probably one of the most iconic wine of this category produced in Italy. Very respect also from our friend from Champagne, that they make an example always with the bottle of Anna Maria Clementi when they want to speak about great bubble outside their region. So I was happy because we was able to dedicate to her the most iconic wine, just because she started everything. So we will speak of the wine Anna Maria Clementi later on.
Yes.
And so I was, let's say, for multiple reasons, going to live in this farm when I was 15 years old, because I was a little bit too engaged in the student, let's say, movement, that revolution that was in Milano in the 78, 70. when there was, the first communist against the fascist, there was a little mass. And so my family decided to put me in exile in the farm when I was 15. And then from this farm, the dream of making wine was born. And I have let's say, a good father called Luigi Veronelli that was helping me
I've heard of him.
to let's say, get the idea and to very integralist in how to do wine and how to make wine. And then the dream is start and Ca del Bosco is become reality. I don't want to add too many to this. It's a long process that is changed year by year. And now Ca del Bosco is not Maurizio Zanella. Ca del Bosco is a fantastic winery with a lot of fantastic people that are playing their role very, very well with a great professionality. And everyone have a big, how you say, ego, and everyone is looking to do always every year better. The fact that we are one of the biggest winery in Italy to be organic certified is already this an example to try to do something impossible, because our latitude is very north,
right,
and is not easy to be organic at our latitude. But we want to do this not to do a better grapes, but to protect our soil, that is more our first asset, and we want to keep it our asset, our most pure that we can. So for Ca del Bosco, organic doesn't mean do a wine where we believe that organic give a contribution to quality. We don't believe in this. We believe to keep our soil and our environmental more clean and more fresh and more integrated possible. And also, if we do grapes that sometimes are not on the same level of the grapes that we was producing with conventional agriculture. And this I want to underline. So we don't write organic on our label. And this is a choice, because we don't want to do marketing, but we are looking more. Many things give quality to the wine, and it's not because it's organic. The wine has something good inside.
I remember I talked to one producer in another area that makes sparkling wine, and he said, I don't want people looking at my wine just for that. I want people to recognize the quality of my wine. And it's the most important thing is not that we're organic or biodynamic. It's like you said, it's a number of factors.
It's many factors, a lot of factors in the wine. And for sure, the most important factor is your terroir, is your territory, and is where Ca del Bosco, in my opinion, is doing a great job, having 10 different villages of Franciacorta in the most altitude vineyard of Franciacorta, and we are concentrated to do the best that we can in valorize our terroir. And in the cellar, yes, we do a great job, but for us it's always secondary, because for us the first point is the grapes and is the vineyard, and is where we try to put all our effort. For sure, in the cellar, we are very innovative, and we are doing innovation that we believe one day will be called tradition, because we are not changing and do innovation with chemical product or with study, but only with simple, crazy things. The most crazy that probably some of the people that are listening to us, they don't know, is the fact that we are washing the grapes, washing and dry the grapes. So it will be interesting if something have time to go to YouTube and digit Ca del Bosco Berry Spa, and they will see how we treat the grapes. And that's very simple. Why we was arriving to the craziness thing to wash and dry the grapes, that is something that no one does in the world. We arrived to this thanks to the organic. because we was checking that the grapes that have some residual of copper on the skin, they was fermenting in a better way, in a worse way, and at level of aroma, the aroma that in fermentation you get from grapes that have some copper residual on the skin doesn't perform like grapes that have no copper residual.
Okay.
So if you go in organic, you are obliged to use copper, but if it doesn't rain a lot, this copper stay in your juice, and it is not helping your yeast to work in the better way. So you're losing a lot of aromas in your wine. That's why we thought, okay, we go organic to keep the environmental, but we don't do to do a worse wine. We want to have the same wine that perform very well in fermentation. So how we take away this copper? So we thought we do exactly like when we eat an apple, we wash it, we dry before to eat it. The same exact thing. So
just with cold water?
Yes, just cold water, and in one stage also some citric acid, just to make a disinfection. And then the more difficult thing is to dry the grapes, because we don't want to leave any residual water on the skin of the grape before pressing. So the most difficult was to patent a machine that was able to dry completely the grapes with no warm air, just with cold air, because we cannot cook our grapes. And so we was able to arrive to a good result. So let me say that from 2008, so it's already some time, all the grapes of Franciacorta, Ca del Bosco is completely washed and dry. And these give a lot of advantage also in the winemaking. And I can tell you the two most important. The one is to reduce in very constantly the use of sulfites. So we reduce a lot the content of sulfite in our wine. The second is that we can do a bigger batonnage to all our wine, because we don't take away the heavy sediment. How you know, in the winemaking process, the fermentation produce sediment, and those sediment, most of the time, they smell very bad. So you are obliged to take it away and to do grappa or cognac with this sediment that you send to do distillation, because they don't smell good. But after washing, those sediments, they are fantastic, and they give a lot of substance to our wine, and we don't decant anymore. We don't take anymore away the sediment, but we just using like in the barrel, and we do the batonnage, and even in the big tank, mixing all the sediment to the wine in order that the wine became more rich using those sediments. So the berry spa give a very good effect to our production system, because the wine are more clean, but they are more powerful with less sulfite. This is one of the many patents that we have in the cellar that we have, because we are never happy. We all want to experiment new things. Another thing very important that we patent already 20 years ago is the dégorgement, so where you pull away the sediment with no addition of sulfite. So was a dégorgement completely done in a neutral area that is filled up with nitrogen. So there is no oxygen, and having no oxygen, when you put the final cork, you are not obliged to protect your wine with sulfite. So this takes you the fact that we don't add 1 milligram of sulfite in the liqueur d'expédition or in our wine before to put the final cork. The result is that we are with the SO2 level around 40, 50, with an average in the sparkling worldwide that is between 90 and 120. So we are from third to half of the normal quantity of SO2 of sulfide that we have in the wine of our competitor, let's say. This system was very unique, and is being, let's say, copied in a certain way from our cousin in north of France. Now they do the big house, they do jetting. That means that they pull inside the bottle a drop of nitrogen before putting the final cork, and this allowed them to reduce the SO2 dosage, but they still use. So our way to work is a little bit different.
Right. And I think people should realize that the final products, a particular style where they're not reductive. There's an absence of oxygen in these wines, and they really keep their freshness. And from what I've tasted, they certainly age extremely well.
That is the key factor, the potential of maturation in the bottle after degorgement is not like you are not to say, well, you have to drink 1-2 years after degorgement. No, you can keep your bottle. If you keep obviously horizontal, your bottle, you can keep your bottle years, and the quality of the wine inside the bottle will improve because there are no oxygen. And so you have not reducing your wine, but you have exploding of aroma your wine. So let's say that with our Franciacorta, we are very, very confident that they can mature in the cellar for 3, 4, 5 years, improving their quality.
Okay. Well, let's start to talk about the wines. The first one, you have a bottle in your hand, and I'll put a picture too, but this is your famous Prestige Cuvée.
Yeah.
And the latest release, as you probably mentioned on the label, there it is. This is the non-vintage. Yeah. This is the 43rd edition. So you've been doing this for a while. So
yeah, so it's the number 43 time that we do our Cuvée Prestige. So obviously, for the people that they are in the market, they know the idea that we have looked that other important wineries they have done before us. And I am talking about Jackson, for example. I am talking about Krug, where the idea was that our multi-vintage wine cannot be lost without to know when was done. So we want to give an ID to our multi-vintage because we believe that our multi-vintage wine must have its ID, must have its history, because the 43 will be a little slight different from the 44. And so the consumer, they will have the opportunity to identify all our multi-vintage, because multi-vintage is something in our philosophy that make our taste different to our wine and improve the quality. You know, Tom, that in the world of wine, what makes the difference is the vintage, because it's forbidden to blend wine from different vintages.
Right.
But there are an exception in Franciacorta, in Champagne, where it's allowed to blend vintages. And so you create the multi-vintages. But normally, the multi-vintages look like the more simple wine of the winery. Is not our philosophy, because in the multi-vintage, for us, we put all the best wine in the reserve, in barrel, used barrel, that we keep several years. And so we have a lot of wine that we use when we do the blend. So a blend can be produced with 3, 4 different vintages in order to have like a painter, different color to do your painting. And if you have more face of different vintage, you can make your cuvée in the best ways possible and give a taste that is more a Ca del Bosco taste than a Franciacorta taste, that have a certain consistency, and is done for the consumer that they don't like to have such big difference between one wine and the other. That is the opposite, what is looking some kind of consumer that they pretend to have a difference between 2017 and 2018. So with the Cuvée Prestige, we try to have more consistency to get our taste, a Ca del Bosco taste specific, that is very successful and the consumer love it. And we don't want to lose this taste and changing every year, but we want more progressive quality, edition by edition. But we want to give to the consumer the freedom to identify the different edition, and that's why we have put the number on the label.
Okay. And I just off the website, I got this information, but I mean, it's primarily Chardonnay, 84%. There's 14% Pinot Nero and then 2% Pinot Bianco.
Yeah.
Most of the blend is from the 2018 harvest with a small amount of reserve wine from 2016-17. And then it's an extra brut, which is terrific because, again, when you say people think, well, this is the multi-vintage is the most simple wine, you don't think of the simple wine as being extra brut. Extra brut is for the best balanced wines, the most flavorful. The dosage is only 1%. And then what I find interesting is that it spent 25 months on the lees, which is, if you think of, that other sparkling wine in France, I mean, I think it's 18 months is their minimum. So that's a long time on the lees for just a so-called, everyday wine that you get, which of course it's not. But I've had this many times, and I have to tell people it's one of my favorite examples of Franciacorta, no matter what. And it's a great introduction to Franciacorta. There's a great consistency year in, year out with this wine. So, complimenti.
Grazie. Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the. You have several wines under a brand you call Vintage Collection, and you first started making those in I believe 2012.
Yeah.
So we'll start with the Satin.
Yeah, Satin is a name reserved in Franciacorta from the wine that have no Pinot Noir by law, just Chardonnay and Pinot Blanc, eventually Herba Mate in the future, but no Pinot Noir. And in Satin, the word Satin is meaning with like silky, because have less pressure inside the bottle. Normally, you have to from 4.5 to 5.5 kilo of pressure inside the bottle. Here, you have to be below 4.5. So the bubble are more gentle and are more small, and so the wine is more not so rude, and is perfect to eat with because it doesn't make too much trouble in your stomach, because the bubble are more gentle, right, and more finesse, and is a Blanc de Blanc. But this wine, at least in Ca del Bosco, have to stay 48 months on the lees before to be disgorged. So this is something in the middle between the Cuvée Prestige, the vintage, and then on the top we will have Anna Maria Clementi that we will speak probably later on. Right. But the vintage that Ca del Bosco produced, there are three. So we have the Satin that you mentioned, the zero dosage, because when we do the Franciacorta, and when we're talking on Franciacorta, most of the time some consumers, some friends, they want to make kind of cross to champagne, and I always say that no, please don't do any comparison, because it's like to compare Bulgari with Bordeaux. Even if they are both Cabernet, they have right, nothing common, even if they are on the sea. Salute, Tom.
Salute, grazie.
And so it's a nonsense to make comparison, which is the big difference between Franciacorta and Champagne, and mostly between Ca del Bosco and the other Franciacorta, is the fact that we don't need to use a lot of sugar. So the more common, what you say, you was telling before, wine of Franciacorta from Ca del Bosco, the Cuvée Prestige, is an extra brut, but we have a lot of other wines that are zero dosage. So in the vintage, we have a dosage zero. Anna Maria Clementi is a dosage zero. We do another Brut that is dosage zero. So we have different wines that they don't need to add any sugar because they don't deserve. The wine are already balanced. What is the difference with other region is that the acidity is not so high, and the wine, they have already their complexity, and they don't need to be helped with sugar. So this is what, in my opinion, makes the difference between Franciacorta and other region, and more specifically, Ca del Bosco is unique in Franciacorta because it's not using a lot of liqueur in their wine, because we don't need to make the wine more gentle.
Right.
So in the vintage, we have the Brut, the Dosage Zero, the Satin. And so these are the three different wines that we are doing with a minimum 48 months on the East, and it's called Vintage Collection. And then on the top,
I want to go back to your point about, you don't need as much dosage because the acidity is not as high. And I think that's an important point. I think, we live in a world of sound bites, and, champagne, for whatever reason, has always been declared, well, this is the reference point for sparkling wine. And you can understand that. So, if it isn't exactly like champagne, some people tend to criticize, and yet Franciacorta shouldn't be like champagne in the sense of, it's the growing region is different, the soils are different, the climate is different, so you have to make the wine differently. So to say, and a lot of people who want zero dosage, they don't realize that some of the best champagnes have quite a bit of dosage, and that's to create a balanced wine. So I think that's an important point. And one other thing I want to bring up is that with Satin especially, people think of that because it's Blanc de Blanc, it's Chardonnay and Pinot Bianco, or sometimes just Chardonnay. It's fresh, it's refreshing, it's vibrant, it's crisp, and yet you mature the wine, the grapes, the wine, excuse me, in barrels for several months.
Yeah.
Tell me about your thoughts about the barrels, large, small, what percentage is new, and what's your philosophy on that?
Yeah. First of all, we have, let's say, even if we are young, we have quite a tradition in used barrel, because Ca del Bosco was producing the first wine, still wine, Chardonnay produced ever in Italy in the 81, 82, we produced for the first time Italian Chardonnay, elevated, fermented, mature in barrels. So we have quite good experience in using barrel. And thanks to this wine, let me say that we are using the new oak barrel for the still wine, and we use the second and third and fourth year for fermenting Anna Maria, and then we use the barrel that have fermented the still wine Chardonnay, and they have fermented the Anna Maria juice to keep the reserve wine. That means that we don't use new oak, but we use oak that they have at least 3, 4, and 5 years.
Right.
The continent to put our reserve wine already fermented that we keep away in order to have the reserve to build the Prestige Cuvée in a second time. So we have more than 3,000 barrels in the cellar that we are using to mature our wine after the fermentation, before that we use to do the cuvée. And this is the big heritage of Ca del Bosco, having a lot of number of old wine in barrel that I believe no other winery have in Italy, such a big number of liter of wine that is reserved, divide from variety and divide for vintage, that we keep in used barrel. And this is also useful when we do the Satin or the other vintage, in order to use some wine that have stayed in the barrel to add to the same vintage wine in order to make our blend before to do the pre-demousse, because to put the sugar. So we have also to use the hood in a very gentle way, because we don't want to do wine that taste the hood, that taste too much vanilla, that they are more pure, but they have the spalla, the shoulder,
Right.
to get the consistency in your glass. So the hood is very important, how we use and the experience that we have in using the hood in Ca del Bosco.
Okay. Let's talk about your most famous wine, Cuvée, if you will, which is the right light here, the Anna Maria Clementi. I hope people can see that. Light is not so great here, but there we are, Anna Maria Clementi. This is the current release from the 2011 vintage. So just off the website, it's 65% Chardonnay, 20% Pinot Bianco, and 15% Pinot Noir. And tell us how you make the selection of the grapes that finally go into the Anna Maria Clementi.
First of all, we are talking of the most old vineyard of Ca del Bosco, vineyard that they are 40, 35, 40 years old, put in the very most high region where we have the more altitude. So we have this kind of freshness that can give the longevity to the wine. And so the more important is where the grapes come and how the grapes are picked. We start the fermentation in stainless steel, but we finish the fermentation inside used barrel. So the first fermentation already finish the juice in the used barrel, and the wine stays in the barrel another year before to do the cuvée. So we have Chardonnay that stay in barrel, Pinot Noir, Pinot Blanc. Everything is fermented, final fermented, and stay in the barrel between 8 and 12 months. Then when the wine are mature, ripe, we do the blend, we do the assemblage, and we blend the wine, not using everything, but using what we believe is the right percentage to get the assemblage that we believe is the good one. So imagine what will be this wine after 9 years on the east, because this is the time that we leave Anna Maria Clementi on the bottle. It's minimum 9 years on the east before to be disgorged. So this is
that's a long time.
This is the philosophy behind the wine, and it's very difficult to think how will be this wine and how much bottle we have to do, because how you can know what's happened after 9 years? You don't know. We are not much, but we try to think what will be this wine after 9 years. So it's a very difficult wine to produce, and that's why we have thought that was a good way to commemorate the founder. So my mother putting her name on the label. That's why this wine is called Anna Maria Clementi, and is the wine dedicated to the founder of Ca del Bosco.
How many bottles of this do you make in a typical vintage?
Depend on the vintage. There are vintage not produced. The 12 will be not on the market,
right?
For example. But normally we go from minimum 30,000, maximum 50,000 bottle. So it's a very small number.
And what is the total production of all the sparkling wine you make?
In a good vintage, because you know we have a gentleman upstairs that is not very gentle sometimes, and they make very bad jokes to us. Let's say that in a good year we can be between 1.7 to 1.8 million bottle a year.
Okay.
But if you we talk about, for example, Harvest 17, we have produced less than 1 million.
Okay. All right.
So depend on how the weather is. I mean, but normally, if our major shareholder is gentle with us,
all right, For us, right? Yeah.
Yes, we are producing around 1.7, 1.8 million bottles a year,
Okay.
and they are supplied more or less 70% in Franciacorta and 30% of still wine.
Okay. Anna Maria Clementi, when did you first produce that?
The first with the name and the bottle was 89,
Okay.
but the first in a different bottle with a different name was 79.
Right.
So the first real was 79, but with this bottle and this name was 89.
Right. Now, for people that are watching that may have a few bottles of some older releases in their cellar and are hanging on to them, how long, it depends on the vintage, but are there any particular vintages that have aged more beautifully? Any particular that are your favorite? What's the typical aging process or cellar potential of this Anna Maria Clementi?
Let's say, Tom, that after the fact that we patent the machine to disgorge with no oxygen, and this was around 2002, 2006. After 2006, all our wine are able to mature really very well, even after 10 years after the dégorgement. In any case, we put on the back label always the season and the vintage where the wine has been disgorged.
Okay.
And so from this date, you could be very realistic to count at least 10 years and having an improvement of the quality.
Right. I'm not looking at the back label here, the 2011. It says disgorged in summer of 2020. So, and again, as you pointed out before, dosage 0. So something that's very important. So, and then a few years ago, you introduced the counterpart, Rosé. Anna Maria Rosé.
This is really particular because it's 100% Pinot Noir.
And that's quite rare in Franciacorta, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very rare. And also it's very rare done with the Saignée method. So just giving the color with the skin and not adding red wine to white wine. So this burn naturally with this color because we get the color from the skin during the first fermentation, during the maceration of the skin with the juice. And so is fantastic, the taste of this wine that is completely natural. And another very unusual thing that perhaps you might know, Tom, that we don't use anymore any sugar to do the second fermentation. The sugar that we use is not the can of bitter, but is sugar coming from juice of grapes. So it's 8 years that we don't use any exterior sugar, but we also use sugar coming from the grape.
And this again is 0 dosage, correct?
Extra brut.
Extra brut, it has a small amount, okay.
Yeah, in the Rosé is extra brut, is 0 dosage, the white wine.
All right.
The white is 0 dosage, the Rosé is extra brut.
Yeah, okay, now I see the note here, it's 0.5.
Yeah,
so
there
it's
is a little touch.
Small. Just a little touch, right? So
yeah,
and there's always this thought that that a white with Chardonnay has got higher acidity, it's going to age longer than a wine made with Pinot Noir, but that's not necessarily true, is it?
No, it's not true. It's not true because, like Tom, Pinot Noir have a great capacity in make the wine mature in a great way. So Pinot Noir perhaps is more austere, is more not so easy get a good result in a short term. My opinion is the best varietal to give a good result in a long term of maturation time. And that's why our Anna Maria Clementi Rosé is a fantastic wine even after 20 years.
Wonderful. I have a bottle of 2008, so I'm not in any hurry to drink it. But
no, anyway. Don't be in a hurry. Don't be in a hurry.
Okay, all right. Just very briefly, we have about 5 minutes left, but I want to talk about your other wines as well. And you make, as you mentioned before, Chardonnay. which
Yeah.
looks like this.
Yes.
This is a 2016, which I tried yesterday. It has wonderful freshness to it, 100% Chardonnay. And
Yeah.
these are all from your estate, correct?
Yeah, this is all estate, and is like I was telling with you in the beginning, is the first Chardonnay produced in Italy using barrels in the 80s. And so I have a very good history, and we have many vintages that they can stay really 20 years in the bottle and show how potential this wine have in our region. So most of the time, some people ask me, why in Franciacorta you do still wine? I say, why? Because we have a tradition. We have started with the still wine, and we will never leave our tradition and our heritage. It makes still wine because it's a part of the Italian winemaking revolution, where it's part of the Italian wine renaissance, those wine, and we want not cancel, and we want to keep producing, even if it's a small amount, because we have a lot of people that love our still wine.
And that's labeled as a Corta Franca IGT.
Yeah, this is the name of, thank you, of the DOC. The DOC.
DOC, excuse me, sorry.
Is no problem. Is a DOC local for the still wine.
Okay, and then you have two other red wines we talk about here, 100%.
Yeah.
Pinot
One
Noir
is
called Pinot.
Nero, that is a shortage for Pinot Noir, Pinot Nero, that is 100% wine that we produce starting in 83, again, from the 100% Pinot Noir. And the last wine that I believe you have in your table, when you try, have a very bad name, looking my name, my signature on the label, and it's called Maurizio Zanella, and is a blend of Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, and Merlot that we start to produce in the 80s always. Was one of the first Bordeaux blend produced in Italy, and is a wine that have again a big heritage, and we are very proud to produce this kind of wine that they mature very, very well.
You should be, because I tried that yesterday as well. And I'm trying some wines from Bulgari coming up for tasting, and I thought, you know, there's some difference, but people just think of Bulgari with Bordeaux blends, but this can hold its own. I mean, it's a different style, but a lovely Bordeaux blend, and it's actually, to me, a little bit more Bordeaux-like. And I mean that as a compliment. You know, you want to keep it separate, but people should look for that wine because it's just lovely. So, so this has been a lot of fun. It's always nice to meet with you, and you're very well spoken about. You're very passionate, as people can see. So, and I love your wines.
Thank you very much, Tom. I hope that the people waiting and listen to us, they have the same feeling that you have it. But so the most important thing, Tom, is to see you in Italy soon.
I hope so too. Yeah, fingers crossed. So. And we can try and hold a bottle of Anna Maria Clementi together. So.
Yes, together.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, Tom. Grazie.
Presto, molto presto. Ok, ciao ciao.
Tom, grazie. Buona serata.
Ciao.
Ciao.